Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery. And today we're with David Hassell. David, what's going on, man?
Hey, David. It's great to be with you.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. And I want to get to you and what you're going to talk to our listeners today about in these crazy times right now, and what we're dealing with this. And
yes.
I think we're all being impacted by this is working remotely, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And working virtually. And you know, I just want to real quick put out our sponsors. I want to thank our sponsors, which is Vulcan7.com. So listen, while we're all working virtually right now, what better time to be in the house contacting expireds and FSBOs and using their platform to make phone calls and auto dial in the CRM. So it's a perfect time for that. So if you want to check out, actually go to Vulcan7.com/path to mastery. That'll work better for you. All right. That's my intro for today. Nice, short, sweet. Back to Dave. Dave, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's good to, despite the madness out in the world, I'm doing great.
I know, man. I'm blessed right now, man. I feel like I'm blessed. My family's healthy.
Yep.
My family's safe. And I think that's the key right now. It
really is.
A lot of people that aren't in that same situation. So, say a prayer for them, and it's what we can do right now, It's all we can
do. And the amazing frontline workers who are, in the hospitals and whatnot. I can't imagine, the courage it takes to go in and have to deal with, what's going on right now.
Amen, man. Well, tell us about yourself, man. Give us a little. Who is Dave Hassell, and why should our listeners be listening to you, man?
Yeah, great. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called 15Five. Been running this company for about 9 years. This isn't my first rodeo. I started my first company just before the first .com boom in 1999. Lived through that crash, which was almost exactly 20 years ago. We had a similar, but not similar crisis, but a moment where it felt like the world was falling apart, and here we are again 20 years later. But I started an ad tech company in New York City, got burned out from that, and went off and started an adventure travel company in Brazil for kite surfers, doing these 10-day adventure tours along the northeast coast of Brazil. Owned a dune buggy, lived on the beach for 6 months at a time, and that was really wonderful. But in those two experiences, my first business, I joked that I was, a young kid chasing the money, but there was no passion or anything that was inherently fulfilling about it. So I decided, you hear the old adage, go follow your passion. So I ran off to Brazil, started this adventure travel company, and that was a lot of fun, but then found out there was no money in it. So, my first business, chasing the money, no passion. Second business, all passion, no money. Took me 15 years to wake up and say, well, maybe I should try to bring those two things together. And that's what 15Five is. And, one of the things I discovered in my first company where I did find fulfillment was finding people who were overlooked by other companies. Maybe they had a gap in the resume, they didn't go to the best school, or they needed a visa sponsorship or something like that. And I give them an opportunity to really learn and grow and develop. And I found that process very fulfilling. And then also discovered a lot of things about personal growth and development myself during that period of time. And so when it came time to start this company, I'd met a guy named Simon Sinek who's written a now famous book, Start With Why, and we became friendly, and he's an investor and advisor in my company. And his message really changed my life and turned me on to this idea that you can go out and align your purpose and passion with profit, and that you can actually bring those two things together. And so 15Five is a company that supports organizations and CEOs in creating extraordinary company cultures, improving the effectiveness of managers, both through the kind of tactical things of doing the things that great managers already do, like checking in on their teams, asking them where they're struggling, those kinds of things, but also the human element, like really understanding, creating open, transparent dialogue between managers and employees about really what matters, how they're feeling, where they're stuck, where they're succeeding, giving them a chance to appreciate each other through something called high fives. And we've grown the company now to about 200 people, raised over $40 million. And I run the company. We were chosen as the number 3 company on all companies out of Glassdoor for under 1,000 employees in terms of the best company cultures. Number 2 on Fortune's list of best Bay Area tech companies, InkSpec's best workplaces. And we've done that by and large with a fairly distributed team. our team distributed all over the world, and me running the company as a remote CEO. So with this whole COVID crisis, we didn't miss a beat when, the 50% of our team that do work in offices had to go remote. And now we're finding ourselves all of a sudden as being leaders in the space of helping companies with remote.
Hey, you got a little guest there, man. What's up, buddy? Well, you know what? Listen, so you said a few things, and one of the things you talked about, which kind of piqued my interest, is you said you sometimes can let's see, I'm paraphrasing, but you give someone a chance that maybe somebody else overlooked, their resume. So
Yes.
how do you know? Like, how is there anything that stands out to you, or how do you know to grab that person that somebody else might have?
So I think that's, look, one of the things that I learned about even that process of supporting somebody in kind of stepping into their next level of performance and growth and development and their, what I call their zone of genius, is there's this concept I learned called unique ability, which is the same as this concept of zone of genius. And it's the idea that every one of us has some areas we're naturally inclined. We have natural strengths. And then there's another set of things where we get energy and we're passionate about them. And where those things intersect is the place that if you can design your work and your career around that place where you have a natural inclination of skill, plus it brings you energy and you have some passion, that's the place where you have the most potential for growth and development and all these kinds of things. And you have the most likelihood of entering the flow state, of feeling energized at the end of your work days, of doing work that is inherently fulfilling. One of the things where I think I have a zone of genius is being able to spot potential, being able to see what's possible for someone before they do it themselves. So it's not something that I think, I encourage managers to do what I call look for the white space. Look for what you can see in your people beyond what they might see in themselves, and try to create a vision of them for yourself in doing that. So, that's just something where I had an intuitive hit about somebody where I was like, you know what? I really think this person could achieve.
Got it. So is that something? I mean, so it sounds like
working real time here with work from home. I got my little kid. I'm closing the door.
I got kids banging on the door out there myself, so it's all good. I mean, so is that something like somebody can look for? Or I mean, you're high. So I get if you already hired somebody, they're on your team, and maybe they're not at the level that you feel like they should be.
Yes.
Maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe maybe they're a great person, but there's something that's better for them. I guess on a team I can understand it. But how do you know? How would you know that by looking at somebody's resume? Or
Oh, it's not the resume. It's usually the conversation. Usually, what I'll sit down with someone. I'll ask them questions about what they've done in their life and their career and why. What they're hoping to achieve, why do they care about what they're doing? Why are they in the kind of work that they're in? And, I think you can kind of read between the lines and learn about, the way people see the why. I'm looking for the why. I'm looking for the passion. I'm looking for, what drives them, what motivates them. Sometimes they're not even really clear about that. And sometimes they might, we've even had situations.
I think most people aren't, right?
Most people aren't.
Is that
they haven't done the inquiry. I think it is accurate. I think if you haven't watched Simon Sinek's now famous TED Talk, it's 13, 14 minutes. Just Google start with why Simon Sinek.
Sure.
And I think, anyone I've shown that to, usually it sparks some inquiry in them about, all right, am I really doing work that's aligned? Great exercise that you can do for yourself or for your team. And I'll often do this is I'll sit down with one of my direct reports and say, okay, maybe I'll do this once a year or twice a year. I'll have them inventory every single thing that they're responsible for and that they do in their jobs. Maybe it's prospecting calls. Maybe it's, writing up strategic plans. Maybe it's engaging with the team or getting on a Zoom meeting and, leading the team in some way. And I'll ask them, okay, now next to each one of those, which are the ones that give you energy and which are the ones that drain you of energy? It's a very simple exercise. But what you find out, if you're below 50%, or if there's someone on your team who's below 50% in terms of the activities that give you energy, there's actually a mismatch. You're in the wrong role, or you don't have the right help. And in fact, when I did this with my director of marketing 4 years ago, she was on the brink of quitting, and she's an extraordinary person who's now, heads up our product marketing. And from the outside, I just looked at her and said, wow, she's great. She does all this stuff really, really well. Turns out more than half of her work was draining her of energy, and she was considering leaving. And had I not had that conversation, I wouldn't have caught that. And out of that, what happened was we were able to hire a marketing coordinator whose zone of genius were all the things that drained her of energy were his things that gave him energy, right?
Interesting.
And that freed up half of her time to start moving into more of the areas where she could contribute in a much bigger way to the company.
So speaking of that, so I want to kind of switch gears now and talk about, working remotely or working virtual. And I'm guessing right now there's probably a lot of people doing things virtually, remotely, maybe that aren't giving them the energy that they're normally accustomed to getting, right? Are you seeing that? And how do people adapt to that? Like, how do we adapt to that?
I think part of the thing is it's not just the work. I mean, we are social beings, and we've been told to socially distance. And I like the kind of movement. A lot of people are saying, well, let's not socially distance, let's physically distance. But the thing is, when you're in a team and you're working, if you're not in an office environment, especially if you're an extrovert where you get energy from being around other people, this can be really challenging. And I think it's important not to discount the kind of isolation and the loneliness factor that comes in. And I think what happens is when people first go remote, or if you go into a distributed team, they overemphasize the work and they don't think about how to recreate the natural social connections that happen in an office or out in the world. And that's as important as the work itself, because what happens is if you're not having the same kind of social interactions and human connection that would just normally happen around the water cooler in the parking lot and the hallways, then you start to become deficient in those. You start to become demotivated, frustrated, upset, and it impacts your work, your worldview, everything else. So some of the things that we've done as a highly distributed team is we've actually, we've built an extraordinary culture, an award-winning culture, even though more than about half the people are working all over the world from their own homes, including myself.
So what are some ways we can do that?
There's a few things that you can do. So every meeting, and we do this with my leadership team, we'll start the meeting with what we call an energetic presence check-in. So we say, where are you on the level of energetic presence? And there's a course and a program by Anise Kavanaugh. She calls it IEP, Intentional Energetic Presence, which is this idea that you can figure out where you are. Like, when you walk into a room and someone's like a 3, right? They feel kind of down. They're a bit of an energy drain and whatnot. Well, it turns out that we can actually tune into where we are energetically, how we're showing up with somebody else, and choose to shift it in the moment. So what we'll do is we'll check in. We'll say, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Everybody goes around the room. They'll say, all right, I'm an 8. And I'm feeling pretty good from the weekend. Or I'm a 3. This morning was really hard. My kids were all, it's hard. If it was a normal kind of life, getting them out to school was pretty challenging, et cetera. So we all get to kind of share where we're at. And then if we're low, even just by voicing it, there's 2 things that happen. One, we can actually kind of come into a meeting as human beings, right, and not be trying to hide what's really going on for us, because that takes a lot of energy. And then even just by naming what we're feeling, it has us be able to cope with it differently, because now we're actually connected to everybody else. There's an opportunity for empathy and connection to happen just in that moment. And we're able to then go into the meeting really clear. So we connect on a human level first, and we share a little bit from our weekend. So, we feel connected. So that's one thing you can do in a meeting. I highly recommend a meeting intro like that.
I'm thinking too, like listening to you right now, that's even more important than ever, right?
More important.
Check in, like, wow, how, I mean, and I'm guessing it has to be a really, really safe environment for people to be able real. To share that type of stuff and be real, right?
It is. And so you really need to kind of put a focus on, creating psychological safety. Give me 1 minute.
Connor's back. What's up, Connor? Hey, so by the way, you can get a free copy of any book you like on Audible at davidsfreebook.com. If you don't already have Audible, check out Audible. As David's dealing with his son Connor. So, but again, sponsors vulcan7.com/path to mastery and then Audible. davidsfreebook.com. Hey, welcome back, man.
Hey, I'm back.
We'll use that space for commercials. How's
That's
that?
fabulous. I love it. So yeah, it's more than it. I would say in any one-on-one meeting, any team meeting, just checking in, spending a few minutes on the personal first is really critical. But we take it to a whole other level as a community and as a team. So on Slack, we use Slack. You might use Slack or Microsoft Teams or some way to kind of create this virtual community of communication. We have a water cooler channel where people are constantly posting all sorts of different things and engaging with fun pictures and emojis and things they're seeing out there.
You know, I never got into Slack. I don't know what is it with Slack? Is it
I
think
we don't do email
tried to use
anymore.
it a couple times. Really, huh?
I mean, if you have a team, if you think about like, so the tech stack. So let's start with the tech stack for remote. Zoom is number one. Like, I think there's so much that gets lost over text or even phone calls that the more you can do video, the better. You can actually really feel connected with someone. There's so much that gets lost if you don't have the, kind of facial expressions and all those kinds of things. So we use Zoom. Think about Zoom as your conference room. If Zoom's your conference room, Slack's your open office. It's your office space. It's like a virtual office. So you can have all these different rooms where people can have different conversations. They don't have to email back with each other. You can have threads. So if you have any team, I'd say larger than say 10 people, using something like Slack allows you to have, a kind of a place to congregate and to not use email because email is very, it's problematic. So we have a lot of different channels. We have a working on channel where people post company announcements and what they're actually working on.
Can I ask why you say email is problematic?
I think because it's very there's a number of things that I think make email pretty challenging. One is that conversations, it's very hard to have a threaded conversation. So if I email you and let's say I CC two people and you want to reply on one of the points in my email, well, you got to reply to the email. You've then got to like scroll down to that one point, put some spacing in, maybe change the text color. You want to loop three other people in, you've now got to CC them and they've got to get caught up.
Sure.
Whereas in Slack, I can have, I'm in a dialogue. I can just quickly reply. I can mention 5 other people. We're now having a dialogue. It's really, really fast. And there's also the opportunity to bring emotionality in through all sorts of different reactions and emotion icons and things like that. So it just speeds. It's much more efficient. Yeah, it's much more efficient for internal team communication. And for the teams who really adopt it and embrace it, they'll find that email then becomes something you just do with outside parties for communications or maybe passing along 1 or 2 things. But I would say I email my team maybe couple times a week at this point versus Slack. I'm on there.
And so what would be the difference? So tell us what would be the difference between something you would email to somebody versus something Slack. I
would say if they're on my team, I'm primarily using Slack. And if I need to do something urgent, I will text them. And then if someone from outside the company emails me something and I need to forward that onto my team, I'll forward it. Or if someone sent me a file, I'll forward it. But for the most part, even files we're using inside of Slack.
So Zoom, Slack, then
so
text?
Zoom, Slack. And, so Zoom and Slack are the 2 first tech pieces. And then our product 15.5 is what we use to actually do management. And then we'll use something like Asana for task management and Dropbox or Box for file management.
Sure.
And then some place to keep all your files together, like written things, and that can be Google Docs or something like Quip. And we use a combination.
So some type of a cloud for storage and such. Okay.
Exactly.
But for communication, I mean, because all the realtors, we all use different CRMs.
Yes.
In the real estate
and
world,
a CRM,
there's so many different. Yeah. So for communication tools though? Zoom, I mean, everybody's becoming an expert at Zoom now. I mean, if you
that's right.
I've never done as many Zoom meetings. I've done more in the last 3 weeks than I've done in my entire life.
Yes.
And I've been doing podcasts with Zoom. And then I'm going to look into Slack because
Yeah.
I used Slack a few years ago and I never really figured it out. But I want to look into it. Is it? And then would you say text before email or email?
Well, I mean, I think that, for me, I would say most of my team communication. So I have a leadership team channel on Slack, and we have different channels on Slack for specific projects. Right now, we're promoting a lot of our expertise on remote work. So we have a remote work channel where a cross-functional team is in there talking about all the initiatives.
Okay.
And so you can create different channels. Some are open, some are private, where you can have conversations with different fixed set groups of people. And then open channels, like I said, our water cooler, our working on. We have a Parents of 15.5 channel. We have a Pets of 15.5 channel. We have, just different groups where people have conversations, around special interests. And so I actually just wrote something on Medium. It's titled, CEOs and Leaders, How to Prepare for an Extended Period of Remote Work. It's a bit of a bear of a read. Medium said it would take 38 minutes to read it, but it's basically.
Can you email that to me and I'll add it to my show notes?
Yes, I'll definitely email that over. But it's
awesome.
Basically got all my thoughts on how to lead a distributed team in a really, really good way, including how we use Slack is very, very detailed out there.
Let me ask you
more
this.
Importantly,
what would you say is the phone? Obviously, a lot of people are saying now, pick up the phone again, get back into that communication with people. Is that something you guys are doing as well, or is it mostly just
for sure
via Zoom?
Well, we're doing mostly Zoom, but I would say that you got to think about communications on every type of communication has its place, right? So I would say the lowest bandwidth communication, which is meant for short textual interactions, you've got text messaging. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have face-to-face, right? So like if we need to have a really hard conversation, if I'm going to, God forbid I have to fire somebody, right? I would, in an ideal world, I would do that face-to-face.
Yeah, in meeting.
Right.
Yeah, meeting
in person. And in this moment, the next best thing would be video Zoom.
Sure.
And then the next lower than that would probably be maybe there's Slack and then there's email and then you eventually get down to text messages. The problem with any sort of text communication, whether it's text, email, or Slack, is things can get, if there's any emotionality, it can get misinterpreted. You lose intonality. I would say text and Slack do a very good job now of at least bringing in more opportunities to put emotion in there through images and GIFs and emoticons and things like that. Email is less so.
Yeah,
and then when you get into phone and Zoom, again, you're starting to get intonation, which is important. And then if you're in Zoom, you at least get facial expressions, which is important. So, those are all important parts of communication. So I like to think about pairing the medium to the message and really, choosing wisely, depending on what needs to be communicated.
A few years ago, I remembered I wrote a book called The Sales Playbook, and years ago I had met with somebody, and I left my office, and he texted me, and him and I got into this whole texting back and I thought about it after. I ended up losing the business, but I thought about it after. The mistake I made was when he first texted me, I should have just called him. But instead I got into this whole back and forth text dialogue.
Yeah,
and
pick up the phone.
Losing the sale. I don't know why I did that.
Yes.
But let me ask you this question: What would you say right now is going to be the biggest challenge with with this remote virtual working? What would you say are some of the biggest challenges we're dealing with?
And it's an interesting thing because I was listening to one of these pundits. Someone had sent me a video. It was, on TV, millions of viewers, and he was talking about the new work from home economy and how, we're not going back. And I think that there's probably going to be a new high water mark. Yes, people are going to go back to offices when this is all over, but I think it's also going to propel this remote work economy in a way that never had been before. And I think it's there is a process of adapting. I think that for people who've been thrust into this really quickly, they may not have the appropriate workspace it's important to have a good workspace. It's important to be able to have privacy. With our kids at home, as you saw, Connor running in the room a few times.
And behind me,
yes, exactly.
I have the doors locked.
Right.
I've got a chairs wedged into my door, so they
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So having a workspace where you can be productive is great, is important long term. Having privacy. I think dealing with the loneliness factor. I think that there's a lot of I think there are a lot of skills and practices that I outlined in that Medium article around creating more of that community is really critical. One of the things that I recently heard, I think the CEO of LinkedIn posted something recently, and it was really interesting to see his take on what he sees is likely going to happen now with this move. And he said, I actually have the quote here. It says, this is Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn. He said, if the last several years of enterprise software has been driven in large part by the consumerization of the enterprise, the next several years will be marked by the communitization of the enterprise, largely fueled by the COVID-19 pandemic and material acceleration in remote work. Work from home employees will not only seek tools that facilitate productivity and collaboration, but software that enables them to feel seen, heard, and truly connected to their colleagues and supported by their company, i.e. the virtual office as community. And that's actually exactly what 15.5 does. That's our domain of expertise. So, I hope his prediction comes true. but I think that's it. I think it's understanding that working from home is not just about being productive. It's about how do we engineer that sense of community that you would otherwise have in an office and still have it if we choose or are forced to work separated from each other. And so, I mentioned those things around, it's not just using Slack that does it, but it's having certain structures in Slack where people can share authentically. It's doing those meeting check-ins. We do a 30-minute meeting every week that has, quote, no business value from the outside that we call Question Friday. And basically what happens is we choose an employee who's going to be the question master for a month. And when they're done, they nominate the next person. And every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, anyone who wants to joins a Zoom meeting. Sometimes we'll have 150 people in there. And this one person will pose a personal question like, what was a dream you had when you were a kid that that never came to fruition? Or what was the, I don't know. It could be as mundane as what was your first car, but it's usually something of that nature. It's a personal question. And it used to be the 10 of us, when there were only 10 of us, would each answer the question and we'd learn more about each other. Then what happened was, as we grew, now we use this great little Zoom breakout feature where we randomly get split into groups of 10. So every week I'm in a random group of 10 other people on my team, some of whom I've never even met before. And we get to share personally about some of our life and our story, and we get to know each other as human beings. And that sense of community and connection and belonging and ability to actually be human beings together and not just independent robot workers around the world doing our thing actually creates this enormous sense of connection and trust, which fuels our ability to work really well together. So you don't have to do that, for example, but it's like, how do we actually engineer, we don't have the opportunity to be like, hey, David, let's go grab lunch. And, over lunch, I'm going to get to know you better. So how do you engineer that in a company if you don't have that? And so I think it's more the question that you need to be asking of how you're going to engineer those social connections and have employees actually feel seen and heard when no one's actually able to put their eyes on them even, and build that sense of community.
So, I'll tell you one of the challenges that I'm experiencing right now, and is there, I don't know when to stop sometimes. Because I find myself just going. I get up at 6 and by 7:30 I'm in front of the computer, and then 7:30 at night I'm like, holy cow. Yes, I think I have to put some perimeters in place for myself and saying, okay, I'm going to check out. Because even though I feel like I'm a little more efficient, although nobody wants to do anything in my industry right now anyway, at least most people don't. Not nobody, but most people. But I'm still find myself doing everything. It never ends, right? Is that common?
It's very common. I mean, I've worked at home on and off a good chunk of my career, and I had a hard time with that for myself for years and years. I think it was actually being forced to not do that when I had my son, and like there were other things I had to take care of that kind of broke the chain. But I think that is one of the on the personal side. That's one of the big challenges. That personal productivity, not. I think that it's really important to have boundaries and to be able to say, I'm going to work now, and then I'm leaving work now, and deciding when and where that's going to happen. And for me, hang on just 1 minute.
Back. All right. It's all good. All right. Yeah, Masters. Again, vulcan7.com/path to mastery. And don't forget to check out our Facebook page, by the way. It's called Path to Mastery. You can find me on Facebook and have access to all kinds of cool stuff. Hey, man, welcome back.
All right, I'm back again. Hopefully with the last introduction, but Connor's getting some good cameos, and it's great.
It's great.
And you're getting some more advertising.
So in kind of wrapping this down now.
But yeah, you were saying, we were talking about, let me just finish the point on the personal practices. Sure. I think it really is important to, to have a play, to decide up front when you're going to go to work, when you're going to leave, and that you maintain that as much as possible. Because there are times when I will do sprints. Like last week, I was writing that article I mentioned. I was at my desk at 6:30 in the morning till 8 at night. But generally, I don't come into my office until 9, and I generally leave by 5:30 or 6, and those are hard and fast rules. Sure. And you have to have that distinction for sure.
I love that. Well, because for me and probably most real estate agents, I'm used to. I get to the office at 8 o'clock, right? Yep. And then I leave the office 5:30, 6 o'clock. That's my normal, and then I go home and I'm done. But now it's like I just can keep going. So, your advice is phenomenal. I love the where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 question. I'm gonna start using that with everybody. I figure out a way to even clients just ask how they're feeling.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I think that's awesome. Because everybody, we're all in this together, man. We're all in this together. This is an interesting time, man, and I see people being more being compassionate and kinder. It's wild. I'm a runner. Yeah, and people are waving like you run by now. People 3 weeks ago, nobody was waving. People like get out of my way.
Oh, that's great.
It's interesting. All right, so what would you say? Anything that I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we missed? Or how do you want to wrap this up?
I don't think so. I think it was a good conversation. I think the most easily overlooked aspect of remote work when we talk about remote work is actually the human element. I think there's so much. There's lots of people talking about how to be productive, use a Pomodoro timer and time yourself and listen to music and, create a nice workspace and all that crap. It's all great. But, leaning into the fact, leaning into our humanity, because this is a moment, you're right. This is a moment where people are kinder and more empathetic and more connected. And, I think if we can lean into that and make that the norm, we're going to have a better world. We're going to have better experience with our coworkers, better experience with our clients, be more fulfilled in the process. So, that's what I'm advocating for.
All right, my friend. Well, hey, it's nice to meet you. I appreciate you coming on today. This is good stuff. I'm going to get it out right away. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so check out, you can look at 15five. It's the numbers 15five.com. We've also got a podcast there, 15five.com/podcast. It's our best self-management podcast, which is based on this idea that rather than doing performance management, if you manage for people's best selves, you get performance, engagement, loyalty, all that good stuff. We've also got a great blog at 15five.com/blog. And also the newly launched 15five Best Self Academy, which is 15five.com/academy. If you're a manager, you can go there and do a free manager certification course on a lot of amazing principles on how to bring out the best in your team. So those are the 3 ways I'd recommend checking this out.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, man, appreciate it. I would just say stay safe and stay smart, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thanks.